Yeah. I think உங்களுக்கு மியூட்ல இருக்குன்னு நினைக்கிறேன்.
Maybe feeble இருக்கலாம். Ma'am, audible, ma'am?
Yeah, it's audible. Shall I share now?
Yes, ma'am. We will check it, ma'am, before starting.
Can you see the slide?
Only that. Yes, ma'am. Now it's coming.
Okay. Okay.
Start, ma'am. Good morning. Now for the second session, we have with us Dr. Meenakshi, Professor and HOD, Department of ECE, College of Engineering, Guindy, Anna University. She did her BE Electronics and Communication Engineering, PSNA College of Engineering, Madurai Kamaraj University during 1985 to 89. And she did her ME in Electronics and Communication Engineering from College of Engineering, Guindy, Anna University. And she did her PhD in Optical Networks from Faculty of Information and Communication Engineering, College of Engineering, Guindy, Anna University. And did her postdoctoral research in optical networks from Faculty of Broadband Networks Group, University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, UK, during the period 2004. And her thesis was on theoretical analysis of CDMA over multimode fiber optic networks. She is a member of Board of Studies, SSN College of Engineering, Chennai, Anna University, from June 2018, and member of Academic Council, Anna University, from July 2017. And she is also a member of Board of Studies, KSR College of Engineering, Tiruchengodu, Anna University, Chennai, from June 2017. Member of Board of Studies, National Engineering College, Anna University, Chennai, from June 2017. And Professor in charge, ME Communication Systems, Anna University, Chennai, from January 2010. The areas of specialization include digital communication, wireless communication and networks, fiber optic communication and networks, UWB transmission systems. She is a life member of IST and IEEE. She has guided 14 PhD scholars, 54 ME and MTech projects so far, and currently guiding 4 PhD scholars and 2 ME MTech projects. She has published 58 research papers in international journals, and she has completed several sponsored projects such as wireless body area networks for telemedical applications funded by UGC during the period 2012 to March 2017. Project cost of 60 lakhs. Next project is on identification of communication systems for a situation awareness unit, completed during the period August 2011 with a project cost of 10 lakhs. Next project is application of CDMA techniques for wireless and optical communication during the period of April 1999 to 2001 with a project cost of 6.5 lakhs. She was the chairman of international level conference titled IEEE International Conference on Wireless Communication, Signal Processing and Networking, conducted by SSN College of Engineering during the period to March 2016 to 25th March 2016. She has been the coordinator of numerous national conferences and delivered several lectures in her field of expertise. It gives us so much happiness to have you here with us, ma'am. Thank you for accepting our invitation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brinda, for giving this opportunity, and I thank your institution also, Sairam College of Engineering, as well as the Atal board for organizing such or sponsoring for such FDPs to be conducted. So the topic for today's talk is going to be on machine learning for smart systems. So we are all aware of, we start our ECE course and many of the other even electrical and all with the very fundamental course, signals and systems. So we know what a system is, and when we say smart system, so it is like putting a little bit of intelligence into the system. Okay, so instead of just doing things in a routine fashion, a system just represented using a fixed transfer function or an impulse response. Instead, if we try to bring in a little bit of smartness into it to adapt to the environment, okay, so then we say it is a smart system. Okay, so that this holds good for any system for that matter, even for a human system or human brain and the way we function. So if we adapt ourselves, okay, to the environment and to the changing needs of the times, constrained by or limited by or bounded by the requirements of the system, then we can call ourselves also as a smart system. Okay, so we here the topic is to see how we can apply machine learning for achieving this smartness. Okay, so to the outline of the talk is going to be what are smart systems, very briefly, because I'm not a very expert in smart system as such, but in all our areas of study and research, invariably we try to make the system better, efficient, energy efficient and performance efficient and so on. So in a way we are all looking at making them smarter. Okay, so we can say, all of us can say that we have one way or the other associated with the smart systems, and some applications of smart system. And I'll just just show you a slide on the applications. I'm not going to dwell on to the applications. Then I go to my area of interest, that's the 5G wireless communication, some salient aspect of that. And I will also tell you how we can, what are the smartness involved here, and how the machine learning can be used to bring about the smartness in some aspect of the 5G wireless communication. So machine learning again is, as the name implies, it's the learning. Learning is something which needs to happen continuously, whether it be a machine or us. So we need to look into the environment, look at the changes in the environment and accordingly adapt. So learning has to be there. If you compare this with adaptive systems, in adaptive systems, you may have some fixed boundaries within which you learn, but machine learning can, particularly the deep learning and all, can learn a wide variety of scenarios, and the learning can happen continually. It doesn't stop in one stage, it can happen. So some of the techniques which are there under machine learning, they have been there traditionally since many decades, but it has become very popular in today's scenarios because of the kind of applications we are envisaging today. A few decades back, nobody thought about vehicles moving without drivers, right? Driverless vehicles. But today that kind of seems to be a reality. If you look into the recent papers and magazines and so on, there is so much focus on this driverless driving or vehicle and so on. 2 decades imagination. If you look at many of the movies, you can see how people had imagined so many things. They are now becoming reality because of the exploitation of techniques, which also they are not new. They have been existing. It's only the matching between the way you apply the techniques to the different systems in making them smart. Okay, so briefly, I'll tell you about just a few, one or two, couple of examples where the machine learning is used, machine learning techniques are used in order to make the 5G wireless communication, some aspect of 5G. 5G wireless communication is a big area. So I'll just focus on one particular area and tell you how it can make it smarter. Okay. So with that, we see what a smart system is. So as you can see, these are pictures I have borrowed from some of the latest literature. So I acknowledge that. And so you can see this is a conventional, the example here is taken for a smart sensor system. We can apply it to any other system for that matter. Okay. So a smart conventional sensor system was where you had some sensors which measure some parameter, and then the system acts upon that sensed value only if the sensed value is above a threshold limit. So this threshold limit could be a fixed limit, or have multiple thresholds or multiple threshold limits, which can be dynamic, but it may not have the continuously learning capabilities. Okay, so this we can treat it as a conventional system where there is a sensor and then there is a threshold, and based on the threshold some application, some control or whatever that needs to be done. Whereas the same thing, when you want to make it smart, then we have the sensors are essential, and then we need to little bit process this data, process this sensor, and then derive a very smart model here. Okay, this is something which is going to be derived. We are not going to define the smart model, because if we can define, then it becomes more like a threshold based kind of a system. Okay, so here a model is going to be derived based on the sensed information, but the sensed information may not be fed directly to the system for deriving the suitable input-output relationships. We need to pre-process the data, in the sense, depending on the application, we may have to extract some features. We extract the time domain features or frequency domain features or wavelet features, or any domain features need to be extracted appropriately. And based on that extracted features, we try to derive a model based on the features and what kind of outputs or what kind of applications we are going to apply those sensed input to. Okay, the control, the actuator information. So based on that, we derive a smart model. So, and this model could be an evolving model, or it can be a one-time evolved model. So if it's an evolving model, then we say it's learning which you are able to achieve. So the application also could be a smart application. It's not that we have only specific way in which you will be applying the sensed data or carrying out the actuator actions. The smartness could be brought in at the application level also. Okay, so when we
Ma'am,
do
excuse me,
this,
ma'am. Ma'am,
yes,
excuse me, ma'am. Ma'am, that is a small window you just minimize, ma'am. Easy Airtel FDP. It's
okay,
coming
okay,
along
okay.
with.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Yeah.
ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah. So such a system, we can call it as a smart system. Now we go to the, even as I said here, the smart model could be derived based on certain known input-output conditions. Okay. Now, when you want to train the smart model, how do you arrive at the smart model? Okay. So that is what we see a bit in more detail here. So you have the sensor inputs, then the data pre-processing. What kind of data pre-processing you do here? Okay. So we have the unprocessed data sets. So we capture a lot of sensed data, and that's what we call as the data set. And from these data set, by certain operations or transformations and so on, signal processing operations, we could extract the features. If we know these are the features that are necessary in order to derive the smart model, then we can do the feature extraction. And these features in turn would be fed to the subsequent smart model. And so this way the machine learning is going to happen. Okay, so the features are extracted, and we train the model. This is the model training, where using the features and the maybe many times it could be, depending on the application, many times it could have the known outputs. Okay, so such a learning we call it as supervised learning, where I know these are the outcomes for this kind of inputs. So that outcome information, if it is available, then we say it is a supervised training. Okay, so using the known outcomes, we could use this data set to train the model, so that the model output as well as the actual outcome, the error between them as small as possible. So that way we have to derive the model. And how do you validate the model? So again, for which you need to use the data sets, some data sets, in order to test whether the model is correctly functioning. Okay, so whatever data sets we are going to have will be in the simplest of situation, we may split some 80% of the data sets for training the model, and 20% of the remaining could be used for testing. So this process is called as the validation process. It's validating your model. Okay, so and the machine learning applications, the kind of models we arrive at will also depend on the application, whether it's a classification application where based on the inputs you want to classify your output to be this or that, like may have a number of elements or number of categories into which you need to classify. So that is one possibility. Alternately, regression is you need to specify a specific outcome value. Okay, instead of classification, it can give you any continuous value for the given set of inputs. So that's what you mean by regression. Okay, so your machine learning, depending on the application, it could be classification application or regression application. So you need so these are some essential components here in machine learning. You need to have the features, and then you need to train the model using many of the models are there. You can use any of them in order to train the model, and then validate the model also. So that is again important. So you have to split your data set into two sets, one for training and one for validation, and arrive at the model. And the application could be classification or regression. So here, one of the challenge here is to extract the features. So how do you go about, how do you know what features you need to extract for the specific application, whether the frequency is important, frequency information is important, or whether the time domain information is important, or whether the power information is important. There are so many features that could be associated with a particular sensed input. So which feature is important in specific outcome? So that getting to know those features is again a challenge. So we go for what are called as deep learning, which we can say is another class of machine learning, where you don't need to define the features. Okay, so you will have multiple layers of processing within the machine learning structure, and given the data set, the model itself will learn and identify the features which are of significance in order to give certain outcomes. So those we call as the deep learning. That's the advantage of deep learning, because you don't need to define the features. Okay, so any smart system which is configured in this manner, okay, so where it can get the inputs and then it can identify the features which are useful for training the model, train the model, validate the model, and such a system we can say, and then act upon the based on the model outputs. So such a system we can say is a smart model or a smart system. Okay. So with this, we look at what are the essential components of a smart system. So irrespective of whatever be the application, okay, so here I took the application of a smart sensor system, but irrespective of the application, okay, you always, for a smart system, you have to give some inputs, okay, some kind of a inputs or environmental information. When I say environmental, it's not going to be always temperature, humidity, and any other thing like that. It could be the environmental information corresponding to the application. If it's a human body, it could be the body temperature, it could be the dielectric constant of the skin, or it could be any parameter, depends on the environment where the particular application is going to be working on, or what are the information that is needed for the smart system to work on. So that information needs to be acquired. Okay, so acquisition of these signals, that is one important component for which you require the appropriate sensors. So that is one important component here. And then there is the command and control unit. So that needs to be there in a smart system. So here, this unit is actually going to take the decisions based on the sensed and processed information. and these information decisions have to be passed on to the actuators. So based on the sensor or the information you have acquired, what is the action you want to do, right? So that action need to be initiated, for which the instructions need to be provided. So you definitely need a command and a control system, and then you have the actual actuator that will perform the required action. And in between all that, in addition to all this, you definitely require the communication elements and the interfaces, which will be actually transferring the sensed information to the command and control unit, and whatever decisions are taken, that is going to be transferred to the actuator unit. And over and above all these, you definitely need the power system, because you need to provide power for all these operations. Okay, so that is also a part of the smart system. So this gives you a block diagram view of a smart system. So we have the smart system here, and the environment, you capture the stimuli from the environment, and this stimuli is sensed by the sensor system, where the sensor could be anything. This is the one that gathers the information. So if you consider the example of an autonomous vehicle, a driverless vehicle, it's going to have a number of proximity sensors. It is going to have lidars. It's going to have radars, okay, in order to detect obstacles, small obstacles, big obstacles, and so on. So like that, you may have any number of sensors depending on the application that will capture the stimuli and give it in the appropriate form to the command and control system that will detect and make sense of this information which is sensed, and that information in turn will identify the actions to be taken, and that in turn will feed the actuator. So in the case of your autonomous vehicle, if an obstacle is detected, then appropriately the mechanical system need to be adjusted, the steering wheel need to be adjusted so as to move away from the object. So the smartness here will come when the system is able to differentiate between a small cat sitting on the road and a paper, a crushed paper. Okay, both will be seen as an obstacle, but if we need to identify for a piece of paper, you need not brake your vehicle. Your vehicle may be moving at 60 kilometers per hour or 70 kilometers per hour. For a piece of paper, you don't need to brake your system. That will make your system highly energy inefficient, right? So, however, if it was a cat that is sitting on the road, definitely your vehicle has to brake. Okay, you have to apply the braking system. So that differentiation between a crushed paper and a cat, that becomes a very important decision that needs to be taken, right? So this is where the smartness is going to help. A conventional system will only detect something is there based on the sensed information, but a smart system will try to analyze and see whether it is something for which you have to take a actuator has to respond or it need not respond. So here particularly in this particular application, the smartness, you have to have all this machine learning and all coming in order to identify what object it is. Okay, that object identification is very important. So definitely in these kind of applications, you need machine learning to be brought in. Just using lookup tables or anything, it's not going to be possible to just identify the object that is present on the road. Okay, so you need an appropriate decision making mechanism as well as the sending in of the control function. So these are all the communication components that's required, interface components that are required, and so the actual action need to be taken. So so these are all the components pictorially that is depicted for a smart system. And this is an alternate view of the same. You have the sensors, you have the interfaces, you have the intelligent processing. Cognitive processing means intelligent processing. Then you have the actuators, and you have both the data receivers and transmitters. And then you need to have a proper database. As I mentioned, in the case of identification of a paper and a cat sitting on the road, you definitely need a very large database in order to learn and identify whether the object is a cat, or you need to classify whether it's a paper or a cat. So you require a large database here, as well as you need to have energy procurement is from where the smart system gets its energy source in order to do all this processing. Sorry. And where it does it store and manage. Okay, so power storage and management, how efficiently, energy efficiently the power is utilized in order to carry out all these functionalities. So this is an alternate view of the same smart system. So this lists out some of the advantages of smart system. So they are going to be self-sufficient, intelligent technical systems or subsystems which will have much more advanced functionality. And these functionalities are enabled by a number of sensing systems there, okay, and other components. So these sensing systems could be at the micro level, nano level, or biosystems, could be any of these. Okay, so acquire based on these sensors and their processing, cognitive processing, the smart system are becoming, they will become self-sufficient, and you don't require manual interventions, and they are going to be much more intelligent also. And they will have the capability to sense, they should be able to diagnose the sense, make a decision as to what it is, what the sensed information is telling it about. And then it should also be able to describe it. If it has to interface with some other entity, it should also be able to describe what it is diagnosed, and it should qualify and manage the particular situation. And all these and it has to work in consort. That means collaborative action is going to be very, very important in this case. So as I have taken the example of the autonomous vehicle, so as I said, you could have the proximity sensors, UV-based sensors, you will have LiDAR sensors, you will have radar sensors. They all have to collaborate, and then based on the collaboration, they need to come up with the proper decision of the obstacle and of the future course of action by the vehicle. So a lot of collaboration is necessary in the case of a smart system. Without collaboration, the system is not going to be smart. And also one of the requirement is that it has to be highly reliable. So when do people have the confidence to adopt a system? When we find that it is reliable, then we will be comfortable enough to adopt the smart system. And depend on application, often it's miniaturized, then it has to be networked, and it has to be predictive and energy autonomous, right? Energy autonomous in the sense it should be able to manage its own energy, right? So that's why we said the energy procurement. So using renewable energy sources or whatever, it should be able to get the energy autonomy. So they are autonomous or collaborative systems. They bring together sensing, actuation, and communication. All these are brought together in order for the system to perform. And they also combine functionalities, and they should be able to extract multiple functionalities or features from a common set of materials or inputs. Okay, from a common set of inputs, they should be able to extract the features as well as what functionalities that are needed to be carried out. So these are all some aspects about aspects about smart systems. And this again is not a there is not really a clear boundary between different generations of smart systems, or I won't say there is any clear definition also for smart system. But based on the papers I have referred, the first generation is actually essentially they were only having the sensing and actuation and a little bit of signal processing in order to perform the actions. So one example being a personal alarm going on during an emergency, or if some elderly person falls or something like that, there is just an alarm bell that goes on. So such an example could be a first generation system. Whereas if there is some prediction and self-learning, then that is categorized under the second generation system. So you have to be predictive when you are looking at self-learning and predictive technologies. We are very much interested in reliability. So reliable and predictive detection of the possibility of a fall. So there is an elderly person moving. So the possibility that the person may fall, predicting that possibility. Okay, so that's where a little bit of learning is coming in here. Fall, and when the prediction probability is high, then the action taken is to enable, trigger the visit by a caretaker or prevent the fall. So that's the action that needs to be taken. So this kind of approach for a smart system where prediction and self-learning and corrective action are initiated. Okay, so this is can be categorized as the second generation smart system. And the third generation is where, uh, which will also include the human perception and cognition. It will simulate the kind of human kind of a behavior and intelligence. So this is more like it's kind of an interface between the machine as well as the humans. Okay, so trying to, for example, remotely analyzing, doing a real-time analysis of a implant within the human body, and to talk with that implant and modify depending on certain activities. If the functionality of the implant can be modified from a real remote location. So such kind of actions, okay, that we can call it as the third generation. So these things are done using what is called as the brain computer interface. So this is the third generation. So you see a lot of such things and so on, but it will take a lot of time and reliability testing to really go for these kind of this third generation of smart systems. So presently, I understand, I feel that we are in the second generation of smart systems, which we can reasonably rely upon. And this is the array of applications for smart systems. So there's a lot of things going on in smart structures and smart construction methodologies and so on under the civil engineering domain. And safety and security and reliability is again of structures. That's again another important area where smartness is included, smart, secure, security, and so on. And then communication, of course, there's a lot of smartness and intelligence and adaptation that has been incorporated. Then energy, how we audit the energy usage and in a smart fashion use the utility of the energy. Okay, so that we operate in a energy efficient manner. So that again is where smartness is going to be of very much use. And home and entertainment, there again a lot of we see about the smart home structures and so on. So their entertainment, there also there's a lot of smartness that is brought in. Then industry 4.0. So that is essentially a very, very smart system where you have all these IoTs and real-time actuators, which are going to make the industry, manufacturing and factories automated with the continuous monitoring without manual intervention. So that again we can say industry 4.0. I will say evolution of smartness. Okay, and of course in aerospace industries also a lot of smart features are brought in. Transport and mobility, I already mentioned about driverless car. There is one aspect of transport or mobility where smartness is brought in. The entire, when the vehicles are moving on ground, they have the capability to communicate with those things are all coming in, vehicle to vehicle communication, vehicle to infrastructure communication, and so on. So there again, a lot of smartness is being brought in. And agriculture, so you are hearing about these days, hearing about precision agriculture, where you don't need to waste the water resource. You can save on the water resource, and you can save on the pesticides. Unnecessarily, you need not put a lot of pesticides and spoil the quality of the vegetation. So only as required you can do precision. That's what we call as precision agriculture. Similarly, smartness can be brought in terms of identifying where the shoals are and in which season and where you are not supposed to do fishing because there is a reduction in the population of a certain fish and so on. So like that, smartness is being brought in under every category. Any area you think of, there is smartness there under clothing and textiles, smart wearable clothing. So they are all today in the news. for the defense people as well as for entertainment purposes. Recently, I remember seeing a woman with a sari which was actually glowing, and they said it's for the Kartikeya special sari and so on. Okay, so it's all, there's not much of smartness there, but there's a lot of imagination for people, and that is actually percolating into every application. So thereby trying to make them smart. And this area is a very, very vast area, health and well-being, where smart applications as well as machine learning and deep learning, they are all well percolating into this particular area. It's not only for under diseased condition, even under for normal human beings, how to sustain a healthy living and well-being. So that's an important area of concern. And of course, protecting your environment. So that is also again very important. So that again, there again, we need to be working in a smart fashion. So where particularly protecting the environment, it's not going to be entirely by machines. Human beings are important component in the protection of the environment. So we come in the loop of protecting the environment and making the environment smarter. So we are in the loop, the smart system loop. So that we need to remember and contribute our or put in our contributions in order to keep the environment clean. So these are a wide gamut of applications where smartness is brought in. So this is just the transport and mobility. I just show the picture where you can see that the vehicles are all communicating with each other, and thereby you can avoid any accidents, collisions, as well as you can also communicate if there's an ambulance coming. It is well ahead communicated to the vehicles, then they can give the way for the ambulance to move and so on. So there's a lot of advantages to go for smart navigation and smart transport and mobility. The ideas seem very wonderful. You must also, if there should be a lot of faculty in this group, so you may have come across students doing a lot of projects under that. But when you try to implement it practically, there are a lot of issues that need to be handled. So that is where we need to focus on how to handle these issues in a smart manner. So controlling the vehicle optimization, navigation aspects, logistic aspects, there's a lot of chances for errors, because if there is a small error, then definitely that's the end of it, right? Because the technology itself has to face the what to say the proliferation or depth of the technology is going to be the fallout of any small error that's going to happen. So it has to give enough confidence for people to work with the technology, so that they have to be as much with zero error as possible. Okay, all the distraction error, navigation errors, and so on. So that would be one of the important objective of a smart system as far as transport and mobility is concerned. This is the just the pictorial view of a healthcare, smart healthcare systems, where the connectivity is a very important aspect. The hospital, the emergency ambulance, or the home, and smart infrastructures, smart gadgets, robots are important component of this smart healthcare, and on-body sensors, technicians, and doctors, nurses, okay, everybody associated with the health of the well-being of a person. So everything needs to be integrated, and appropriately they need to collaborate in order for the achievement of good health and well-being. So personal diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment is one important component. Preparation of targeted drugs and implants. That's again another important area where smartness can be deployed. Recently, you may have heard about, not only recent, that's been there always, that whenever antibiotics are prescribed and frequently keep taking these antibiotics, our body becomes immune to them, right? So if we can use the antibiotics according to the requirement of the individual person's antibody requirements, accordingly, if that can be done, then that significantly keeps your immunity level better. So there we have to work in a smart fashion. So that's what I mean by preparation of targeted drugs which can be targeted to the necessity of the users, instead of just arbitrarily providing the drugs to each and every person. Okay, and enhanced levels of telemedicine and personalized health system across the community. This is just a sample aspects which are coming under the smart healthcare systems. And then coming to the communication applications, here actually I'm not really focusing on the communication application. So this particular slide actually shows you the difference between what is smart and what is not smart in the current usage of your mobile systems. So or some of the features that's available in your mobile systems. For example, you have the camera here. Okay, so this camera, it just not only captures the scene, it is actually analyzing the scene. It is deciding and adjusting the focus and the exposure and what is the shutter speed and what is the white balance. All these are analyzed and appropriately acted upon, and then it outputs once they are all acted upon, and then the picture is taken. Then it gives you a corrected compressed image file. Okay, so that's the outcome of this particular system, camera system. So we can say it is a smart system. Okay, whereas and similarly, if you look at the radio in the sense the RF system, the RF system is going to continually scan the available frequencies. It's going to analyze the signals. It's going to decide upon the optimum mast, what is the power it has to send, and if it is multi-antenna system, what is the antenna it has to use, and how to maintain the connection. Or to maintain the connection, what is the data rate at which it needs to transmit. So when I say this, the data rate needs to transmit, that it means it's like trying to find out what is the modulation it has to use and what is the coding rate it has to adopt and what kind of encryption needs to be adopted. So these are all decisions that need to be taken by continually scanning the available frequencies, continually scanning the environment for the availability of frequencies and so on. So if such a thing is done, then we can say it is a smart system, because it's not randomly. It's taking all these inputs into account and then making a proper decision. Okay, so we can say it's a smart system. Whereas if you consider an application which is actually downloading a file, say an MP3 file based on a predetermined algorithm, so this we can say is an automated system, but it's not a smart system. Okay, so it depends, depending on different application, could be downloaded using different algorithms. So it is just a 1:1 kind of a mapping. There is no smartness actually involved here. Whereas in these systems, in your radio system or in the camera system, there is smart processing that is involved because of the analysis and the subsequent actions that are taken. Okay, so that we need to be clear about. So I just gave you a broad overview of the different applications, just 1 or 2 pictures, and then we go to the specific aspect, that's the 5G wireless communication. You all may be hearing about 5G wireless communication in the recent couple of years, and even in the recent news, our Prime Minister has also given a lot of impetus to develop our own indigenous technologies suited to the Indian conditions. And IITs and IISc and Samir and some of the organizations together, they are developing one aspect of 5G or a couple of aspects of 5G so as to deploy it in our country. Okay, and all the fiber backbones, your Reliance and Airtel, they all put up the fiber, the high capacity front haul back haul. So that supports how many of the operators have already set up so that that component is not going to restrict your 5G communication. So most probably by April or mid of 2021, the deployment would start off for 5G. So that's the expectation, and the recent news, which maybe yesterday's news or day before yesterday's news, you must have seen that. So a lot of focus is given on 5G, and there are a number of technologies which enable 5G. One thing you need to remember, 5G, fifth generation wireless communication, is not only focusing on the wireless communication aspect, it is actually driving changes in every other domain. It is driving a lot of change in the networking domain. It's driving a lot of change on the backhaul, front haul transport domain. So, and it is also driving a lot of change in the for example, the way you make use of the cloud technologies and so on, how you make use of the hardware and software resources that are available for efficient usage so that you maximize on the performance at the reduced cost. So it is, and it is also putting a lot of pressure on the chip industry in order to derive the RF chips required at the higher frequencies. Now, millimeter wave is one important aspect of 5G. So millimeter wave essentially are above, it's few tens more than 30 gigahertz and so on. That's where we start defining it as millimeter wave. Though currently in India, the studies and network maybe initially deployed in around the 23, 24 gigahertz frequencies. So at such high frequency, designing the RF is going to be very, very challenging. So it is also putting a lot of pressure on the chip industries in order to derive the RF transceivers and so on. And there's a lot of parallel works going on along in the optics domain too, in order to support equally to this 5G technology. So there are a lot of enablers here. One of the important enabler is the massive MIMO. Just before proceeding, I just want to get one input. The participants, what is the faculty specialization as far as the participants are concerned?
All domains, ma'am. All domains, ma'am. All.
Okay, no, so just wanted to understand, I need to go a little bit in, or I can just scan overall for them to understand.
Most of them from easy only, ma'am. Easy background.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
So yeah, so many of you may have been have heard about MIMO. Some of you may have come across it in your curriculum, or even otherwise. Many of us are using the mobile phones, and we are definitely using the 4G technology now. And one of the important aspect of 4G, from the usage, you will understand how much faster speeds it is supporting. One important enabler for that was your MIMO technology, multiple input, multiple output technology, which essentially means using multiple antennas at the transmitter and multiple antennas at the receiver, thereby providing multiple spatial transmissions to increase the data rate. Okay, so in 5G, it is expected to take these numbers to significantly large values. In 4G, the maximum number of antennas at the transmitter at the base station was restricted to around 8. And in LTE, it was actually restricted to 2. And of course, 4 was an option for the mobile unit. But in the 5G technology, this is expected, the number of multiple antennas for the transmitter is expected to be of the order of hundreds of antennas. Okay. So the array size would be of the order of hundreds. Okay. So that's a huge number. That's why we call it as a massive MIMO system. And in the normal MIMO that is used in the LTE itself has a lot of signal processing challenges. Now, if we can imagine the massive MIMO system, then there are going to be more challenges. One important challenge in massive MIMO system is, in order to exploit the usage of the multiple antennas, they have to be spaced apart. The distance you have between the antennas, has to follow certain restrictions. Okay, you cannot place them very close to each other, and you have to have a certain spacing between the antennas. That in turn depends on the wavelength of usage. What is the radio frequency signal you are using? For what is the frequency of the signal and what is the wavelength of that signal? So that wavelength is going to dictate what is the spacing between the MIMO antennas. Okay, so a thumb rule is that it has to be greater than lambda by 2. If it is lambda by 2, then it is like having different antennas. Otherwise, there will be, if you space the antenna closer than lambda by 2, then there could be a lot of correlation between the antenna signals. So the orthogonality or the separable usage of the antennas is going to be restricted if you put them very close to each other. Okay, so that spacing is a restriction. And if you're going to think of hundreds of antennas, then it's going to be very, very difficult. Your base station structure, antenna structure is going to be a huge structure. So in order to overcome that, another aspect that is considered is to go for the millimeter wave communication. So this massive MIMO and millimeter wave, they go together because of this aspect. You have more number of antennas to work with, but at the same time, in order to reduce the size, we have to go for millimeter wave frequency. Millimeter frequency, the frequency is very large, so the wavelength is small. So when the wavelength is smaller in the millimeter range, you can easily put a number of antennas within, say, a 1 meter by 1 meter or 2 meter by 2 meter and so on. So you can accommodate more number of antennas. So those two technologies, massive MIMO and millimeter wave technology, go hand in hand in realizing the advantages of some of the data rate advantages of 5G wireless communication. So other than that, you have ultra dense and heterogeneous network configurations and multiple different ways in which the users can access the resources, and different ways in which the multi-carrier modulations can be used, many different ways in which the modulation coding systems can be implemented, and something called as the full duplex and flexible duplex, where in today's systems, FDD systems, we try to make use of one particular carrier frequency for transmission and another carrier frequency for reception, whereas in full duplex system, it is expected that we will use the same frequency for transmission and the same frequency for reception simultaneously. So that puts a lot of challenge in the system design, RF system design, as well as the baseband design. So those are all features that are exploited for the 5G. Similarly, device-to-device communication and sharing of spectrum, which we normally call it as the cognitive systems. So these are all technologies which are promising. So I'm going to focus on this combination of massive MIMO and millimeter wave, how we achieve smartness in this technologies. So massive MIMO systems is an emerging technology. It's kind of going to be the in thing for your 5th generation networks, which scales the MIMO by many orders of magnitude. The antenna arrays are going to be having hundreds of elements, and but because they have hundreds of elements, you can't expect them to be placed on your mobile unit. So that is one thing we have to keep in mind. It may be available on the laptops or somewhat larger structures, communication devices, but may not be in your mobile units. However, they may be placed at the base stations, and particularly if you're going to go for millimeter wave structures, then relatively the sizes are going to be manageable sizes. What do we get from these massive MIMO systems? One important thing is we can get significantly higher data rate transmissions, and the reliability can be significantly improved, and also energy efficiency. All these things we can achieve by going for this massive MIMO systems. So this shows how you achieve a better reliability. You can exploit transmit diversity or beamforming or receive diversity.
Excuse me,
Yes.
ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Slide is not moving, and now it's coming, ma'am. Rate, reliability, and energy efficiency. Okay.
Yeah. So the reliability and energy efficiency can be achieved by exploiting transmit diversity or receive diversity, where essentially, since you have multiple antennas, you can transmit the same information over multiple antennas, and it's exploit the diversity mechanism, so that even if the signal that went through one antenna fails, there's still the same signal coming via another antenna, which can be captured, and you could have better signal to noise ratio. And we can use appropriate techniques like MRT, maximal ratio combiner, transmitter or maximal ratio combiner, etc. And zero forcing based interference suppression, because when you're receiving signals from multiple antennas, one could be interfering with the other. One of the signals could interfere with the others. Those kind of self interference can be suppressed using zero forcing methods or MMSE methods and so on. And thereby you can significantly improve noise ratio. Alternately, we can also use beamforming, because you have an antenna array with you, by appropriately feeding the inputs. Okay, we could adjust the phase of the input as well as the amplitude of the input. Thereby, you can define the radiation pattern of the antenna. You can keep redefining the radiation pattern of the antenna as per your requirement. So that's called as the beamforming. That is one important aspect of 5G wireless communication. That is also the one which I'm going to focus on in order to look at the smartness. It's brought in there, machine learning based smartness. So beamforming, transmit diversity, these are all methods by which you can significantly increase the signal to noise ratio, as well as if you're getting better signal to noise ratio, that means your reliability is improved. Your bit error rates are going to get reduced and hence you get a better reliability. Alternately, rate increase is achieved by exploiting, since the base station has multiple antennas, it can simultaneously establish links with multiple users on the same frequency. Okay, because we assume it's not an assumption, by exploiting the scattering in the multiple scattering in the channel and by exploiting the multi antenna, it is possible to isolate the transmissions to this user and this user and use appropriate interference suppression techniques here as well as here, and thereby have increased the rate. Now simultaneously you're able to transmit to multiple users on the same frequency. So this is presently not possible up to our 4th generation network. In 5th generation, using this massive MIMO technology, it is expected that you will be able to increase the rate. The individual users rate is not increased, but the throughput of this base station is increased because it is using a single frequency resource and it is establishing communication with multi-users. So this is called as multi-user MIMO. And alternately, if the receiver unit is also having multiple antennas, then it is possible to increase the rate for the single user. Okay, so the base station can configure the system to simultaneously transmit different information. Okay, so maybe packet 1 goes through this, packet 2 goes through this, alternate packets go via these different streams in a parallel fashion, and thereby the rate is increased for the single user. This is called a spatial multiplexing. So in order to achieve this, these two channels have to be ideally orthogonal, but that is not going to be feasible. There is going to be some interference of this signal on this and the interference from there on this. So they will be suitably addressed by proper signal processing at the receiver end. So this is called a spatial multiplexing. So you get increased throughput at the base station or increased throughput at the user end and better signal to noise ratio. These are all possibilities using the massive MIMO and millimeter wave combination. So I just put that in word form. So it improves the multiplexing gain. Spatial multiplexing increases the multiplexing gain, where the delay spreads. I'll show it in pictorial form. So the multipath propagation can be treated as different independent paths to a specific receiver. Thereby we can exploit it. It's equivalent to having different equivalent channels, okay, on the two paths. So you can send, if these two equivalent channels are resolvable and you're able to identify these channels, then we can send out the different data streams on these parallel channels to a specific user, thereby achieve a higher data rate. However, as I said, if you're able to resolve the channels, that's very important, or if you're able to get some idea about these channels, then it is possible for us to exploit it and achieve a higher data rate. So channel estimation, how accurately you estimate the channel here. So you have so many antennas at the transmitter, so many antennas at the receiver. So whatever you transmit here is going to reach this antenna. It also reaches the other antenna. Similarly, every transmission reaches every other each one of the receiving antenna, and you can define a channel characteristic between any pair of antennas. So that we give it as H11. H11 here defines the channel between the receive antenna 1 and the transmit antenna 1. H21 defines the channel between receive antenna 2 and transmit antenna 1. So we can define a channel matrix here. Okay, so depending on the NT number of transmit antennas and NR number of transmit antennas, that it's going to be of size NR cross NT, and that many channels have to be identified. What is these are called as channel coefficients. What are these channel coefficients? That needs to be identified. That is one important problem in MIMO systems. Okay, unless you're able to do this channel estimation, you will not be able to realize whether beamforming or spatial multiplexing or multi-user MIMO, they're all going to be very difficult unless you get some idea about this channel state. Okay, so accurate channel state is a very essential requirement if you have to maximize on the multiplexing gain or maximize the rate at which you transfer to the different users. So this shows the same multiplexing this is for the same one user with multiple antenna. This shows multiple users, groups of users or different users which are exploited from a single base station. So the MU-MIMO, multi-user MIMO scenario. And of course, coming to the beamforming, there again, the beamforming has to be done in a very smart fashion. So that here again, you need to remember that what you're seeing here are the different transmission beams. So these transmission beams are all going to be uncorrelated in the sense whatever you're transmitting here should not be causing interference here. So that's how the radiation pattern of the antennas have to be defined. Okay, so that the interference to the other user is going to be reduced. The thing we need to remember is that all these radiation beams are available on the same frequency, on a single frequency. That's how you're able to increase on the rate, at the same time increase the signal to noise ratio, because the energy is focused here towards a specific user. So the instead of an omnidirectional transmission on a single frequency, here the transmission is focused or it's directional. Thereby you increase the signal to noise ratio for the particular receiver and improve on the energy efficiency. So there are a number of beamforming scenarios. So for example, you see here, this is a base station antenna. You have these two users and two users, and there is a relay station to which this antenna has to send out information. It's actually extending the reach of this base station by communicating to this UE. This is a user equipment, okay? But the communication is not happening directly, but it's happening through a relay station. So it is forming a beam towards this relay. The beam is also, this relay is also having a focused beam towards this particular. So you can see the beam matching here. And this in turn is forming a beam to the mobile user equipment, so that it is relaying the information that is transmitted from BS2 to UE2. So this is what we mean by coverage extension. Okay, so this user is actually in the blockage region. So this building obstacle is blocking the direct transmission from the base station to the user. However, if there is a relay station, it can relay this information to the user equipment. Whereas these are all in the direct path, LOS path. So it's able to form beams towards them. So it has to properly identify which are the directions in which the UEs are present and accordingly form a beam. So that is a smart operation. That's why the antenna here is called as a smart antenna system. That was the older name that was normally given, where a smart antenna system is an antenna array system with the smartness coming from the signal processing which you are doing prior to radiating the signal. Okay. So in some of the application, you're going to see the ML is used here. Machine learning is used to make the antenna smarter. So this again another base station communicating with this and a UE. And here the UE here itself is acting like this is actually, we can say it's kind of getting a spatially multiplexed signal or a diversity signal because of these transmission. This UE is receiving signal from the direct beam as well as the reflected signal coming from a beam and so on. So these are different scenarios for beamforming. So another thing to focus on is like and to remember here is, if I know the exact locations of the users, if I have taken the angle of arrival of the different user locations, then I should be able to, for example, when I am focusing the user, a beam towards user 1 and a beam towards user 2, suppose there is an interference signal, I can form the radiation pattern such that there is a null here. So any signal that's coming from this direction, that will see a null in this beam pattern. So that is what I mean by an intelligent array, intelligent antenna array. So which not only focuses on putting a beam, directional beam towards the desired user, it is also focusing on this reducing this interference here. Okay, so by putting a null at this point. So it can reject interference and directionally send the information to the desired user, thereby save energy and improve on the signal to noise ratio and the system capacity. Yeah. So this just shows a simple beamforming process. So here you have your transmitter, the RF transmitter unit. And this is the control unit which is going to apply the appropriate phase shift. So these are the feeds to the antenna, and as you can see, a fixed constant phase is applied to each of these units, and you can see in the absence of this, if all this was 0, then this antenna array would have given maximum radiation in the broadside. So this would have been the direction of the radiation. But when a constant phase shift of theta is applied, okay, so you can see that the direction of the beam is shifted. Okay, so this is just a very simple process that is shown. So it is not sufficient to just adjust the phase. Sometimes, in order to bring about variations in the, like this kind of pattern, if you want to bring about a null here, then you have to adjust the amplitude of the feed also. Okay, so adjusting the amplitude of the feed in the RF domain, it's not a very easy job. So phase shifting alone is normally applied in the RF domain. So if you have to adjust the amplitude, then you have to use attenuators. Okay, so variable attenuators have to be deployed, so that will make the system very complex, because you'll be working, the phase shifters are also, you're actually applying at the higher frequency. Suppose this was a 30 gigahertz signal, the phase shifter is working at that particular frequency. So that's a very challenging issue, designing these phase shifters. You may not get a very precise control of the phase. Okay, so the desired beam direction also may not be as precise when you're trying to work with the RF phase shifters and so on. But when you're doing this control, phase control in the RF domain, then we say it is an analog beamformer. So this shows the architectures of the different beamformer architectures. So this is an analog beamformer where you have a single RF transceiver and you have an array of antenna, and you apply the phase shift in the analog domain. Okay, so these are all analog phase shifters. So we call this structure as an analog beamformer. Whereas if you can do the, you have the, yeah. So here you're actually taking the you have different RF transceiver. For every antenna you have a transceiver unit, and then you are forming a digital. When you say digital beamformer, that means in the baseband, in the complex domain, we try to work out what are the different feeds to the different antennas. Okay, antenna elements. So we can, since in the digital domain, by adjusting the complex weights, we can change the amplitude as well as the phase shifts can be brought in. And precise control can be brought in, because digital domain we are working in the baseband, so we can bring about a very precise, or any continuous value change in the phase and amplitude can be defined when you are trying to work in the digital domain. Okay, so we can do all the phase changing and amplitude changing in the digital domain, and that information will be passed on with an appropriate digital exciter or receiver. So here it is, this antenna is acting like a receiving antenna. So that will appropriately control the radiation direction, or in the direction which you are going to, your radiation goes out, or the direction in which you will receive the signal, both for transmission as well as reception. So that pattern can be governed, and precise control can be realized by going for a digital beamformer. So this is an intermediate solution where it's an alternate implementation of the analog beamformer, where you try to apply the analog beamforming in the intermediate location here. So instead of after upconversion to here it is upconvert, signal is upconverted from the baseband to the RF, and then you're applying the phase shift. Instead, you can apply the phase shift and then do the upconversion. The drawback is here require only one RF transceiver. Here you require number of RF transceivers depending on the number of antennas. Okay, so this is an solution or an alternate solution for doing the analog beamforming. But since you're having more number of RF transceivers, it is as well better to go for digital beamformer architectures. So this is the, of course, in order to do this, in order to identify how much is the phase shift and how much is the amplitude shift that need to be given, again, we need to understand the channel state, which is the direction in which the user is present, which is the direction in the interference is present, and all those, the channel state information is necessary in order to formulate the feeds to the respective antennas. So this is the, this normally we do for the MIMO channel. This is the MIMO channel, R cross the number of receiver antenna cross the number of transmit antenna, MR cross MT, MIMO channel. This is what needs to be estimated. And this estimation is again larger the size. We said massive MIMO, the antenna array size is very large. That means this matrix size is also going to be very large. Suppose it's a 100 element array, 10 cross 10, then this matrix will be a 10 cross 10 matrix. Okay, so you need to know this matrix if you want to use the system for spatial multiplexing. You want to send out parallel transmissions of signals from the antenna, from the base station to the mobile. Then you need this information. You have to somehow estimate this information. So once you have estimated this information, you know this matrix, then we can do what is called a singular value decomposition. And using these decomposed matrices, U and V matrices, we can apply these to the transmit signal and the received signal, and then get effective realization like this. So this realization tells you that from this we can see that the output, this is a modified output, this is the actual output, this is the modified output. The modified output y1 of k is nothing but sigma 11 into x1 of k, whereas y2 of k is going to be sigma 22 into x2 of k. It's like you have decomposed the MIMO channel by removing all the interferers here, interfering elements here, making them all 0. You are kind of decomposed into empty number of parallel channels. Okay, empty number of parallel channels. Okay, so that is the objective of the decomposition. But in order to do the decomposition and effectively identify what is the maximum capacity you're able to realize, the maximum rate you're able to realize, you need to know this channel coefficient. Okay, so that process is called as channel estimation process. And I'll skip these slides. This shows the process. So you need to estimate these elements here, and each of them is a complex element because the channel could be affecting the amplitude as well as the phase of the signal. So each element is a complex entity. So if I have to estimate this entire H matrix, it means I'm going to have R is the number of receivers, T is the number of transmit antennas, and so R into T number of parameters, you have complex numbers you have to estimate. And each complex number is made up of a real element and an imaginary element. So there are two, the real values you have to estimate as well as the imaginary elements value you have to estimate. So it's 2 times R into T. That many parameters you have to estimate. For a 100 element array, you have to estimate 200 parameters. So that's again a very, very tedious problem. So and this estimation has to happen within the coherence time. So the coherence time is the duration over which the channel state is stationary. So within a small fraction of the coherence time, for example, the coherence time is 10 milliseconds, I should be able to estimate the channel within 1 millisecond. Only then I can make use of the channel information for increasing the rate or forming the beam, etc., and transmitting over the remaining 9 milliseconds. Okay, so I have to do this estimation in a very much faster manner. So for MIMO system, it's going to be more number of parameters, so that will also consume time. So we have to do it in a very intelligent manner. Okay, so this is one area. I will not go into details of channel estimation. So I will say that that is one important area where machine learning is exploited in order to look at the pattern of signals received and identify what is the channel. You can consider the signal received as a pattern, and for that normally a training symbol would be transmitted. So for the training symbol is known to the receiver. Okay, so that information is known by just looking at the pattern of the received signal. If you can directly map it to a specific channel matrix. Okay, so that way if you can model a smart system can be modeled using machine learning, then that is going to be a very advantageous option for 5G wireless communication. So there's a lot of work that has gone on behind doing a very smart channel estimation using the machine learning concepts. I'm not going to focus on that. I just want to say one application under channel estimation for that. So this again shows the another scenario for the millimeter wave massive MIMO systems. The focused narrow beam focusing aspect is shown here between vehicles and infrastructures and so on. So I'll just go to one application of this beam forming machine learning for doing a very intelligent beam forming in massive MIMO system. Okay, so there are many ways in which you can apply the machine learning. So one thing, you can do a supervised learning. So where you will already have some of the training data sets, and what is the output corresponding to that. That information is also available with you. Like you have a number of channel based data set, and you know that for these data set, these are the beams that are suited. Then you can always go for a supervised learning mechanism. Okay, that information is known to you. So that sometimes that may be very difficult, because the scenario is not going to remain the constant always, and what kind of channel inputs you're going to keep getting, that will keep on changing. Okay, because when the mobile is in one particular place, you may get some kind of a channel input. When the mobile is a different place, you get a different kind of channel input. And it's not only one mobile user, that could be n number of mobile users. At a time, you will have only 2 mobile users. At time, you may have n number of mobile users. So the traffic scenario also changes, and the channel state scenario also changes. And so it becomes very difficult to go for a supervised learning kind of a environment. The learning approach that is used in one of the works available in the literature uses what is called as reinforcement learning. So here it assumes that the target data set is not known. So we do not know what is the data set, okay, that's going to be available to us. If we know that, and if we know the ideal beam pattern, then we can kind of use the supervised learning and train it. Or when you have a fixed number of possibilities, okay, but here you are going to have any number of infinite number of possibilities are there. Okay, so the target data set is not known, but you associate a reward function, and which will provide some insight into how the model has to evolve. It continuously keeps learning according to the evolving unknown data sets, okay, or the data that are coming in as usual. Okay, so here you have different networks here. There are actually 3 networks that are going to be working in tandem. First generator network. Okay, so this is a generator network that will actually produce samples of user locations. The scenario is kind of, you can say the fixed infrastructures can be known a priori, and it will generate, the first generator network will produce samples of user locations for the specific cell, and according to some predefined probabilistic distribution. So it's going to be using a probabilistic distribution and defining the user locations. Okay, so the traffic scenario is going to be dictated by the first generator network, and there is a second generator network that takes this as input, and for this input it will try to produce the antenna beam patterns for that particular cell. Okay, what could be the possible antenna beam patterns for this random combination of user locations in the specific cell. Okay, so this could be replicated for different cells with different scenarios. Okay, so it tries to find the antenna beam pattern, and then you have a discriminator network which actually evaluates the performance of the cell. If this was the user, the traffic scenario, and if this was the beam pattern, then what is the aggregated throughput that you will realize. Okay, so this is giving the traffic, this is giving the antenna beam pattern, which it assumes is good for this particular traffic, and based on this the aggregate throughput is estimated by the discriminator network. So depending on the feedback, okay, so this throughput estimation is using the conventional formulae. For the capacity formulae, you have the bandwidth and the SANR here. SANR stands for signal to interference plus noise ratio. Because the beam which is generated may not be ideally focusing towards the desired user, it may be a little bit off from the desired user. So there could be interference signals that may be captured and so on. Okay, so this information is also known to the discriminator network. This is also known to the discriminator network. So it should be able to estimate the SANR, and it tries to find out the aggregate throughput. So based on this aggregated throughput, it sends out a feedback to generator 2 and tries to again update the beam pattern. Okay, so with a different beam pattern now, again it will evaluate the throughput, and if there is a improvement, then it kind of rewards this network. So this reward is nothing but, we can say it is a parameter which will help this network to drive in a particular direction, move in a particular direction. Okay, so that's how these steps will be continuously going on. The step 2, 3, 4 for the scenario generated will continuously keep updated. Okay, and finally, the convergence criteria here is that theoretically, for this situation, theoretically, what is the maximum throughput that can be realized? So that information will have. So if you are able to reach a situation which is some k times, this k value is the multiple of the Cmax. So we are able to reach that. That k could be from 0 to 1. We can definitely not have a capacity which is greater than what is defined by Shannon, or the modified version of Shannon's capacity for MIMO channels. So k is a fraction from 0 to 1. So we keep on doing these three steps again and again till this we are able to converge on the value of k. Okay, as long as k is improving, we need to keep on continue this algorithm. So this denotes the update about the status of the different signals and the patterns. This ST denotes a signal pattern, this ET denotes the antenna field pattern. Okay, so this is continually updated depending on a reward parameter provided by the discriminated network. So this is where this reinforcement learning approach is used in order to arrive at a beam pattern for the specific data set. Okay, so thereby you can try to maximize on the capacity or the throughput that you can realize. So this is called as an intelligent beamforming in a massive MIMO system. So one of the advantage in this method is that you are actually not so you're actually taking the different possibilities are defined here based on a probabilistic distribution. So by exploiting more and more number of combinations, we may be able to look at all major possibilities that can be expected in the particular scenario. So that is one example where we are just looking at a beamforming with the objective of increasing the throughput for a given bandwidth and for a given number of users. Okay, thereby reducing the increasing the SANR. So that has been the simple objective here to identify the beam patterns. Okay, so when you're looking at the beam pattern, you're also looking at maximizing the beam towards a signal direction, and since interference is also a parameter here, we're also looking at putting a null in the direction of the interference. So all these aspects have to be taken into consideration when this SANR is estimated in this particular method. 5 minutes. Guest lecture. So another example I would like to give is about the coordinated beamforming. Coordinated beamforming is where you have some users, a single user could be serviced by a number of base stations. So you have one base station here, there is another base station here, there is another base station here. All these base stations are coordinating or talking with each other, or cooperatively they are trying to service this user, and this user. Okay, so such a scenario we call it as a coordinated beamforming. They will form the beams in coordination with the other base stations inputs also. Guest lecture la irukene or 5-10 minutes solunga, guest lecture la irukene solunga. Okay, so so here again you can see that this is one way of doing coordination, and you can see the typical cell structure here. So these two base stations can coordinate, and you can see this user, there is a beam formed towards this user and a null, and there is this is the direction of interference, and this is the beam that is formed towards this user, and so on. So okay, you can appropriately, so in this direction actually there should be a null that is placed in this beam, and so on. So this shows a cooperative or a centralized beamforming. This is a distributive beamforming. Here you see that the three base stations are not talking with each other. So these lines show the interface or the collaboration and the processing happening at a central unit. Here they are not actually talking directly with each other, but it's in a distributed way. They are trying to realize the same functionality of forming beams towards the respective users, mobile users. So some of the challenges in this scenario, particularly when you're using millimeter wave also here, Millimeter wave being a high frequency signal, it's like more directional. For example, light signal, you will be able to receive it only if you're able to reach the, it's more of a line of sight kind of a situation. Only then the received signal strength would be better. Okay, so the 1 minute, excuse me. Yeah. So the sensitivity of the millimeter wave signal propagation to blockages is very high because it's more like a line of sight propagation. So once the signal blocked, the total received signal, the connectivity may be lost. So, excuse me, I'm just getting an important call. Hello. Hello. நான் ஒரு கெஸ்ட் லெக்சர்ல இருக்கேன். 10 minutesல முடிச்சிட்டு பேசலாம். சரி, லைன் கொடுங்க அப்போ. சரி. ஹலோ. மீனாட்சி மேம் தான் சார். ஒரு கெஸ்ட் லெக்சர்ல இருக்கேன், அதுதான். ஆமா ஆமா. ஓகே. ஓகே சார், நான் இப்போ அதில் எழுதி கொடுத்துட்டுமா? ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே. சரி சரி, ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே. ஆமாம். அது கொடுத்துட்டு I'll ask her to give another letter, sir. I'll give her to another letter. Okay. Okay, okay, okay. Okay, okay. Okay, 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 sir. Okay. சரி சரி. ஓகே ஓகே. கொடுங்க. ஓகே சார், ஓகே சார். ஓகே சார், ஓகே சார். Okay, okay. Recommended for extension. Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Okay, okay. Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, sir. சரி. ஓகே. சரி சரி. அப்போ இப்போ ஜாயின் பண்ண வேண்டாம் சொல்கிறீங்க நீங்கள்? ஓகே. சரி சரி. ஓகே ஓகே. சரி. சரி சரி. ஓகே ஓகே ஓகே. சரி சரி. ஓகே. அதெல்லாம் வச்சுருக்காங்க சார், நிறைய வச்சுருக்காங்க, எல்லாம் வச்சுருக்காங்க. ஓகே. சரிங்க சார். ஓகே ஓகே சார். Sorry for the small break. I just wind up So millimeter wave signals, they suffer significantly from non-line of sight scenarios resulting in connectivity loss. And also under mobile and dense deployments, frequently if handover is going to take place, it imposes a lot of control overhead. That is again a very important component, and also may introduce, because of the processing of the control overhead for handover, latency issues also may come in. And further, since we are working with massive MIMO system, because there is a large array, the training overhead, you have to get these you have to train the antenna array. So that also imposes, in order to get the beams, that also imposes a large fundamental limit on supporting mobile users. So these are all limitations which comes as a combination of millimeter wave and massive MIMO systems. So how the deep learning can help towards coordinated beamforming in order to overcome some of these challenges which I mentioned there. Okay, so the deep learning model is used here to predict the BFV. Here stands for the beamforming vectors. So the base stations have to formulate the beamforming vectors in order to support the different users. So this prediction, for predicting these beamforming vectors, the deep learning to be utilized. The major advantage here is that we need not depend on the locations of the users. Okay, so the location information is not needed. We could just look at the signals received at the distributed base stations. For example, we go back to the picture here. Each of this mobile user is transmitting signals. So, excuse. Hello, sir. Hello. Sir, சொல்லுங்க. சரி, எங்க வரணும் சார்? Same place. Okay, okay. I'll come, sir. Okay. Okay, okay, sir. Okay, right. So each of these mobiles are going to send out signals. So the base stations, whatever signals it is receiving, so it will be processing these signals. The base station need not know about the actual locations. In the previous model here, I said the locations are going to be simulated here. Okay, the first generator produces sample locations. So this model, the second example model, which I'm going to say, it doesn't need the location information, because getting location information is normally you require GPS transceiver receivers and so on. And for indoor situation, that it may cause a lot of errors, as well as the resolution of GPS may not be sufficient enough in order to support the small cell network scenarios. So the location based location, instead of taking location as the input, the received signals themselves at the base stations are going to be taken into consideration here. And the signals, these signals are used to jointly received at the distributed BS are used to define the multipath signature of the user location. As well as it not only gives an idea about the user location, it also gives an idea about the surrounding environment as well as the multipath situation. Okay, and the beamforming prediction is going to be based on the signals, and so whether the path is a line of sight path or NLOS path is immaterial, right? Because that is going to be inherent in the identification of the signature as well as the surrounding environment. So based on this information, the optimal beams are going to be predicted with negligible training overhead. But there is one issue called as pilot contamination that, if time permits, I will highlight about that. So this is the conventional method where conventionally how we can go about is we get the received signals, and the central processing unit decide based on the received signals. The central processing unit will try to formulate the baseband beamforming vector, that is your FKCP, and then this information is passed on to the base stations. The base stations in turn formulate the RF beamforming vectors, and using this applies the baseband beamforming vector, and the base stations will formulate the RF beamforming vectors, and both together the combined information is going to be sent out through the mobile station. And this will be equivalent to, when this is done, this equivalent to forming the different beams to the respective mobile units. Here you can see all these three base stations are coordinating with each other, and they are sending out beams to the single mobile unit shown here. They are sending coordinated beams here, which are coming from different directions because of the different locations of the base stations. But the application of this baseband beamforming function as well as the RF beamforming function. So when I say the baseband and RF, so here it is in the complex domain, here it is in the analog phase shifting domain. Okay, so the combination of these two results in beams here to the mobile user in such a way that the signals will coherently combine at the base station. Okay, so thereby, suppose this mobile was in the edge of a cell. Okay, so because of the coordination between these base stations, maybe one of the between this base station, there could be some obstacle here also. But in spite of that, because of the coordination, the receiver mobile user here gets a better reliable signal or higher signal strength. Okay, so that's the merit of the coordinated beamforming. Here only one user is shown, but you could have multiple users here, and there could be coordinated beams formed towards the respective mobile users such that signals coherently combine at the receiver of the mobile station. You need to note here the receiver is mobile station having only one antenna. Okay, but it is getting radiation from 3 different directions, but they have to be going in phase. Though they are coming in different direction, this antenna is an omnidirectional antenna. It will be able to receive all of them. However, the signal that goes into the RF unit, they are all going to be going in phase. Thereby, they constructively combine and give rise to a better signal to noise ratio. So that's what is the advantage of coordinated beamforming. So how you make it robust is by applying a deep learning. How the deep learning is used here is shown by the structure. So deep learning is used in 2 phases. In one phase, the deep learning, the model is actually getting evolved. You are trying to evolve a deep learning model that's called as the learning phase. And in the next phase, actually the deep learning model starts out to predict the baseband beamforming vector. Okay, downlink baseband beamforming vector. So here this sequence is like this. In the learning phase, okay, in the learning phase, in practice, the base stations are having an array of antenna. So they'll be sending out multiple beams. Okay, you can see the multiple beams here. And the mobile unit normally is an omnidirectional antenna. So it will send out the pilot signals. Okay, each of these mobiles will send out pilot or training signals, and these will be received through the different beams. And from the beam outputs, the base station normally is able to identify which is the beam that is actually pointed towards this particular, sending out a common information. However, the base stations are receiving it through the different beams, and they are able to identify which is the beam that is focused towards this particular user. Okay, so that is the identity they make. And what is the rate across a rate over this different beams. Okay, the once you know what is the signal that is coming out from each of these individual beams, then we can calculate the data rate or the capacity that is coming in over this particular beam. So those rates are calculated. And there is also an omnidirectional antenna that is present in the base station in order to implement this kind of coordinated beamforming. So the signal through that omni is also received, and the rate corresponding to that is, this is going to be somewhat a diminished rate, but still that rate is also taken into consideration. Both this information are passed on to the central cloud processing unit. Similarly, each of the base stations, you have say n number of base stations who are coordinating, each of them will receive the pilots through the individual beams as well as the omni beam, compute the rates for all the beams and the omni beam, and pass on this information. So these base stations are all located in different locations. Okay, so the location and environment scenarios are getting captured within this rate calculations. Okay, and this is sent through to this coordinating network, where there is a neural network that gets trained according to these inputs. And there is the conventional, whatever methodology is set here, the processing unit that is also initially function, that will conventional beamforming network will also function, and this neural network will get trained based on these inputs, this rate inputs coming from the beams as well as the omni beam, as well as the conventional beamforming network that will be operating here. Because that's going to give you the beam outputs. Okay, it will be taking these as inputs and giving the beam output. So that all this information will be used to train the neural network, and thereby the deep learning model is going to be evolved here. So the model evolution process is happening in this phase. And in the prediction phase, okay, as you see, in the prediction phase, the base station is not going to be using the multiple antenna array here. It's going to use only the omnidirectional configuration. So there is no need to the overheads associated with each of these processing of the multiple beams. That calculations are going to be avoided here. It's going to just consider the reception via an omni beam. Similarly, each of the base station considers the reception via the omni beam, and this set of information is passed on to the trained neural network model, which will output the prediction. It will output the predicted beamforming vector. So this vector in turn would be used by the base stations in order to send out their transmissions to form the beams, final beams, and so on. Okay, so this way, lot of coordination of the control overheads are significantly reduced here. And if you look at the time frame structure, In the learning phase, you have the omni frames as well as the different beam signals processed through different beams. So the pilot is sent again and again so that the base station can capture the signal through each of the beams. Okay. So and then finally you have only a little amount of frame period available for data transmission once the ideal beams are formed for constructive interference at the mobile unit. However, in the prediction phase, as you see, you don't need to send out over all these different periods. Only the omni beam uplink is sufficient, and the beamforming vector information would be provided to the using that omni, the machine learning model, the deep learning model will give out the beamforming vector that in turn can be used, and you can use most of the frame period for sending out the data. So there is significant reduction in the overhead as well as the latency of the network. So that's the advantage here by using the deep learning model here. And the smartness actually is giving you it's making the network continually learn, memorize the different scenarios it is experiencing as the different traffic pattern, channel state, etc. And thereby it increases the robustness over time. That's why you say it is a smart system, smart beamforming system, smart and robust beamforming system. So this is a neural network architecture. You have the base stations which are giving the received signals corresponding to each of the beam vectors here. This is the omni vector. So since it's a complex number, that a complex that's it is decoded and having the complex information, real and imaginary component, or you can say the in-phase and the components, so that are fed in here as inputs, and each of the base station feeds this input here. And prior to processing through the network, there is a pre-dataset normalization, per dataset normalization that is done. So the entire dataset, based on whatever is the maximum value, it is normalized. There is a necessity to do the dataset normalization with respect normalization normally done to keep the range of operation to within reasonable limits. But we do the normalization over the entire space so that we don't want to lose out on any of the variations between the signals within the base station or between base station to base station. We want to capture all the relationships. So we do a per data set normalization. So over all the elements, we try to find out what's the maximum and normalize it with that. So we do the normalization, and then we have a fully connected neural network using the rectified linear unit as the activation function. So any values which is less than 0 would be negative values would be mapped as 0. Only the positive values would be mapped to the specific value itself. And following the fully connected neural network, you have a dropout layer which is needed in order to reduce the overfitting. Normally, when you apply machine learning techniques, if the network model tries to match with every input scenario, input condition, then we call it as an overfitting, because the model finally that you have got will give a lot of errors when you're actually passing your test data. Okay, so we should avoid overfitting. We should avoid underfitting also. So sometimes we'll drop off some of the inputs which are not really fitting with an optimum model. So we reduce the certain inputs, dropout stages are there. So you have a number of such fully connected neural network layers and dropout layers. So you have a number of such hidden layers, and finally you have one fully connected layer. At the output of that, it gives you the different possible rates. Okay, what are the rates that are possible for this given set of inputs? Now, rates possible for the different antennas, transmit antennas. Okay, so when this rate is achieved, these rates can be mapped to specific beamforming vector patterns. So that once you know the rate, already we know what is the beamforming vector that gives you this particular rate for that particular antenna. So that information is already available from the learning phase. So the beamforming vectors, the combination of beamforming vectors can be used for realizing the coordinated beamforming at the mobile unit. So the inputs here are the signals, actual signals, the in-phase and quadrature signals, and the output is actually the rates, okay, which correspond to specific beamforming vectors. So that way we say it is an intelligent and robust beamforming network. So with these two examples for applying your smartness or machine learning concept for improving or making the system more smarter. I just wind up my talk. So already I'm very late. So
Okay, ma'am.
sorry for a bit of disturbances in between. These are some of the references which I have, just few of the references which I have used for preparing this talk. A couple of students are doing some work on this deep learning based coordinated beamforming. It's very interesting. A lot of open source softwares are used in order to apply these deep learning. So I think can explore. There's a lot of scope for exploring these areas.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Ma'am, it was really informative session. Today we all come to know how machine learning techniques and deep learning techniques are playing vital role in 5G networks evaluation and how we are achieving smartness in networks. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. So any questions are there? I think people can send out through mail because I'm encroaching into their lunchtime, I think. So I don't want to do that. Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Bye.
Participants, you kindly join the meeting again by 2 o'clock for the third session. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.